Welcome everyone to today's webinar, 3 Paths to Adopting AI and Automation, Point of Solution, Proof of Concept, or Enterprise-Wide. On behalf of Becker's Healthcare, thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to walk through a few quick housekeeping instructions. First, we'll begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We will also have a series of poll questions during today's webinar. You can submit the answer that best applies to you directly on your screen in the slides box. Thank you in advance for your participation. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be made available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access that recording. And finally, if at any time you don't see your slides moving or have trouble with your audio, try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. We are here to help. With that, I am pleased to welcome today's speaker. Matt Kalina is the National Strategic Lead at Olive, a healthcare artificial intelligence company that is the market leader in developing and deploying AI workforce programs for hospitals and health systems. Matt is a solution and product enthusiast with a passion for disruptive emerging technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the future of work, and startups. With a focus in healthcare operations over the last 6 years, Matt has developed AI programs alongside some of the nation's leading healthcare providers to drive overall business transformation and strategic growth. Matt, thank you for being here today. I'll now turn the floor over to you to get us started.
Thank you so much, Molly. I am very happy to be here today to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. We're going to be walking through 3 paths for adopting AI and automation, focused specifically on an implementation model of AI as a service. We'll be walking you guys through different customer stories and profiles on how they've introduced this to their organization, the things that we've learned along the way, and the developments and recommendations that we've started to implement as standard operating procedure when helping hospitals and health systems adopt an AI workforce solution. As Molly had mentioned, my name is Matt Kalina, and I am the National Strategic Lead at Olive. So in my role, I get the awesome opportunity to work across all of our enterprise engagements with hospitals and health system leaders throughout the industry, helping them to deliver on best practices, think strategically about how to leverage this technology that's ever evolving and always advancing. As some background on Olive, we are healthcare's first and only AI as a service provider. Olive was introduced in 2017. We're about 400 employees. We have over 60 hospital and health system customers. And through our innovations with our partners, we've built, designed, or deployed over 1,300 unique AI candidate processes for automation, touching all areas of hospital operations. And today, there are over 10,000 FTE worth of AI workers at Olive logging into hospitals and health systems across the country to deliver transformational value. The growth rate of Olive is actually around 370 FTE worth of AI workers being added on a daily basis. So this technology is making a very fundamental impact within the industry that you all are servicing today. So some of our learning objectives for the conversation today, and what I'm going to review with you all, is that we're going to talk about some of the most common AI and automation implementation models, and then we're going to focus on one of those, which is AI as a service, which I'll explain a little bit more as we get through the presentation. And then we'll actually walk through several examples of point solution customer profiles that have navigated introducing the technology to their organization via that methodology, and some of the lessons that we've learned across these different implementation models. So you can gain real-life insights from your peers on how they're navigating adopting this new technology and getting the buy-in required for a technology that's become extremely pervasive in addressing the challenges that we are all facing as folks in the healthcare industry. So this slide is just sort of to set the stage. With the dire need to root out inefficiencies today and reinvent the future of care for tomorrow, it's no longer a question of why to invest in AI, it's how to invest that makes the difference. Because across the industry, the vision of what's possible does not match the reality that most of us are encountering. While healthcare organizations are near unanimous in their belief that AI enables a competitive advantage, those that are implementing RPA and AI are failing as often as they're succeeding. And most projects are not producing the anticipated ROI when they kick off their projects. And while greater than 60% of healthcare organizations have deployed an AI strategy today, the vast majority of healthcare executives are struggling to achieve true enterprise-wide impact, instead adopting niche point solutions or failing to get more than a single project off the ground over the course of a year. And we hear these stories every day with our partners and other folks interested in learning more about the technology. That's a huge problem because organizations are betting the farm on AI, bringing in expensive consultants, setting up centers of excellence, and all of this just to get a project or maybe a couple of projects operational within the end of a full calendar year, with effort and resourcing, trying to eke out results from their programs. So why such hope and yet such a dismal outlook at the same time? Well, all too often, providers start in the wrong area. It's hard to find expertise in both core healthcare business processes and AI technology, but that often means that organizations are selecting the wrong tasks to automate, whether they're comparably low value or high effort, or maybe the task that they decide to embark upon as an early project is far too complex for a first project, so the value that it generates can be challenging to convey across the organization relative to the level of effort that stakeholders within the organization have put into the process. Also, there's an opportunity for improvement around selecting the right implementation model. There's oftentimes self-service AI platforms that are deceivingly simple, but carry hidden costs and unintended consequences that can compromise mission-critical operations that you're applying this technology to, which can penalize your market advantage and set you back months and millions of dollars. For example, failing to resource the care and feeding of an AI or automation program after it's gone live is really challenging to think about, and many organizations overlook this. This adversely impacts the stability and the quality of your operations. When you're relying on automations to get the job done and no one is there to spot or rectify failures, you're left with a major disruption, scrambling for a way to get your operations back on track. You're often relying on automations to efficiently complete work, and when there is a challenge or something breaks, this can be extremely challenging to rectify in a meaningful time frame to regain the benefits that you initially had anticipated. Automation also without intelligence limits the impact that rather than just static process completion. So if you're not thinking of employing more advanced technologies on top of some of the more commodity, just basic RPA solutions that exist, there's a huge opportunity that's missed with the value and the intelligence of the information that you're gathering through some of these more robotic processes that your teams might be doing. Also, if you're building a bot or an AI use case in a silo versus connecting it to a network, it can limit greater benefit. This is very, simply put, you end up having a program that is personal best versus industry best. And the name of the game when you're dealing with these intelligent technologies like AI, machine learning, and layering in some process automation, there's a huge amount of opportunity to improve the effectiveness of that work by looking at larger sets of data to inform things. So everything that we do at Olive, we connect to our network. It's essentially, when you think about an automation that's not connected to a network, not learning from every interaction that your AI worker is having within your organization or beyond, it's kind of like having a computer that doesn't have the internet. It still can be valuable, but the long-term view of the value that can be generated with that sort of network is something that you're not necessarily capitalizing on. So in short, the model for adopting AI matters. It's the most significant factor impacting whether or not an organization achieves results whether the vision matches the reality. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the challenges in some of the models, and again, focus on one of the models specifically that Olive has adopted as the way to introduce this technology to our partners, which is AI as a service. So we've highlighted here a couple of considerations for an AI workforce implementation model. So there's sort of the build component, which oftentimes is a healthcare provider will evaluate a number of different vendors and then use internal staff that they may already have or hire experts to come in on their team and build and deploy these solutions within their own environment. This can be really attractive, especially for IT leaders, but at the rate at which this technology is advancing, it's really difficult as an organization that's doing this in the silo of their own organization to really capitalize on all the values and lessons being learned across the industry. And there can be some challenges with this, but you can see a comparison on task automation. Obviously, each of these models can accommodate that. The second model being a consult model. So this would be where you hire a consulting firm or an accounting practice. A lot of times they have some ready-to-go automations or AI use cases that they've helped deploy in sort of a pilot scenario with a couple folks, and they have a couple of ideas to help you get this program started. And then finally, the third option, which we're going to focus the majority of our time on today, is the model that we have adopted in order to capitalize on the value of the ever-evolving technology that we're working with, and that's AI as a service. So that includes us, helping you to identify, build a roadmap, set up the governance to approve things, get the right buy-in that you need, which a lot of these points we'll hit on as key takeaways from each of the adoption models we're going to talk about as it relates to AI as a service. So when we're thinking about choosing the right AI as a service adoption model, since that's the one we're focusing on today, there's a couple different ways that you can adopt this model, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. The first one is a point solution. Oftentimes this is where a individual or a department has a pressing need that they think this technology could be applied to. And a lot of times this is where the organization is not as educated on the technology and they need some proof in the pudding to get the right buy-in, share this with leaders, and ultimately, hopefully expand this program as the technology can be really pervasive in delivering value across many areas of the enterprise. The second model that we're going to talk about and share a few of our customer examples and profiles for today is the proof of concept. And the way I'm defining this for the presentation today is where it's not a point solution, so it's not just one problem or use case that we're looking to address. This is where an organization has a little bit more education on the technology and is looking at a couple of different areas that are oftentimes a little bit more unique. So it could be multiple use cases or opportunities within one area, one department, or it can be a couple of things across multiple departments to really prove, can this do a breadth of tasks across our organization while we still work to gain more enterprise buy-in? And then the final model is enterprise-wide. So the technology has advanced a lot. The adoption models and the application of the technology is no longer as new or as foreign. It's less science fiction, more science function today. And a lot of organizations that are looking to make a meaningful impact within their organization start out of the gate with the team and tools in place to do this fast and at scale across the enterprise. And that's possible now more than it ever has been due to the developments in the technology, the vendors in the space. And I'm even going to share some of the things that we've learned along the way that maybe we didn't execute on as great when we first started exploring this space back in 2017 when we started introducing Olive to the hospital and health system market. Another thing to look at is the investment. So investment is really important. I think there's a lot of lessons learned on things not being as easy to get started as some folks think with other adoption models. But there's a huge opportunity to look at the investment as it relates to the cost, but also the overall value that can be delivered by this model. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier on, the network effect and learnings from other organizations and just the sheer amount of data and what that can enable for an effective use of the tool really starts to tip the scales in the way of the value that it can generate. Again, going from that personal best to industry best can be orders of magnitude difference in the value that can be achieved within your program. So the third one is around impact as well. So there's a couple of different things here. So, there's a lot of times, a cost reduction component, which most organizations we work with are looking at this more as capacity increase. There's a million things everyone wants to do every day. So how do we really realize the value and impact of this solution? And I'll talk about a couple examples when we get into the customer profiles in each of these adoption models on things that they've done to redeploy staff in other areas, to really maximize the benefit of a tool like this, to increase the impact of the organization can see from this type of technology. Another thing to think about when you're looking at unlocking value from AI within your organization, I've highlighted a couple of the key things that you'll want to dive into as an organization when you're aligning leaders to think critically about deploying this technology. We'll actually be sharing after this webinar a worksheet that we've put together to help folks make sure that they're addressing some of the key questions that you would need to ask yourself, your organization, and the vendors when you're looking at these 6 different buckets of selecting. How do you really identify if a partner that you're talking to is scalable and can do multiple things as opposed to just a few things well? How do we look at scoping? So it's not just I have one pressing need. Oftentimes the technology can use intelligence to identify areas of impact upstream and downstream. So how can we really build a roadmap to make effective use of the resources that you're pulling together around this initiative? And then also implementing. The technology still feels fairly new, but there are quite a few partners out there that have done this many times, and there's methodologies for implementing things that can actually deliver significant value in very little time. So having a partner, how do we validate if this person's done this before? Not saying that someone who hasn't done it before isn't somebody that you would want to partner with, but there's definitely efficiencies to be gained by someone who's doing this considerable amount of times more than others that are just sort of kicking the tires on implementing the technology. Also, the fourth component is on maintaining. The continuity of your AI operations is absolutely critical to the effective use of the technology. No one wants to plant their flag on a project that is showing promising results at the beginning. Something happens, you're upgrading your EHR on a quarterly schedule, or other things that may impact changes within the workflow or the use of the technology that can actually make a significant impact on the ability to deliver the value continuously for your organization. If this work is taking on mission critical functions for you, especially with a lot of our partners, I would say 90% of them start in revenue cycle operations. That's a really critical task and infrastructure that you're investing in. If it doesn't work or if things go bump in the night, it can cause a lot of challenges. So making sure you're asking the right questions with the partners you're evaluating on how they think about supporting your AI and automation workforce after it goes live. Oftentimes the go live is the exciting part, but really the fun begins when you are looking at the automations. That brings me to the next piece, which is optimizing. There is a ton of data exhaust that's coming off of these AI workers within your organization and across the industry. And a more static solution that's more transactional based may not be capturing all of the value if you're not analyzing the data to do trend analysis, anomaly detection, to really educate you on other ways that can drive more value into your organization. And optimizing your AI and automation program should look very different on day 365 than the first day that you implemented it, because these intelligent technologies can help to optimize and create additional value for your organization. Which brings to the next one, is extending. So how do we identify and activate new work? There's oftentimes some functions that people will take on with an AI or an automation technology, but what that ends up doing is surfacing tons of other opportunities. And how do we make sure that we set up a structure with a vendor How does the health system make sure that they're interacting with the vendor in the right way to capitalize on things that may be popping up? For example, if there's a pandemic and now we need to focus on testing for COVID-19, how do we work hand in hand with our vendors to make sure that when we identify new work, we can quickly identify it and activate against that to increase the value that this program can have? So the models that we're going to talk about for implementing, again, AI as a service, the results may vary for a build or consult model than it will for an AI as a service component, but there's probably some learnings that we're going to cover today that could be applied to those other models. Generally, what we're seeing is that folks that are doing the build or consult models are using more basic commoditized RPA solutions to do small pet projects around reporting or other more basic functions, rather than some of the mission critical data intensive processes that are more uniquely suited for an intelligent or AI as a service offering. But the three that we're going to dive into today and provide a few customer examples and lessons learned on is point solution, proof of concept, and enterprise-wide. The point solution model usually is pretty easy to start. There's usually less stakeholders that are involved. It could be a director or a manager that has some unique process or challenge that they're looking to address and can implement that technology. Usually has a more defined scope and has a smaller upstart cost because you're not building out a team or setting up a much larger engagement, because it's looking at a point solution or a specific niche solution that you're looking to deploy. Some of the cons of this is that, when I say not repeatable and not scalable, it's that there's oftentimes opportunities that are peripheral to the challenge or problem that you're looking to address, that if you're looking at just a point solution, it may not be able to adapt in incorporating additional value for some of the peripheral use cases that can really maximize the effective use of the technology. And oftentimes, you're starting new each time. I think about this very similarly. This transformation is very similar to a train. So if you're looking at a point solution, you're putting a bunch of coal in the train to get it going. You get the train on the tracks. You've got all the people there, everything you need. You've got IT involved. And then all of a sudden you deploy the point solution, and now the train has come to a stop. It takes a lot to get that going again. So there's other models to help make sure you're capitalizing on the the eyes that you have in your organization, the support across different departments, because there are stakeholders across all different parts of the organization that need to be involved in this. And a point solution can be challenging to kind of get that started again every time you want a new problem to solve if you don't set up the right frameworks. And we will share with you some of the lessons we've learned along the way in supporting the point solution side of things. On the second piece, the proof of concept, this is usually a little bit larger, as I mentioned, a number of use cases, usually between 5 and 15. And this could be within one department or across multiple departments. This still has a strong opportunity to start very quickly. There's potential usually to expand and be a little bit more flexible in looking at other values, areas of value. But there's also on the con side of this, it usually takes a little bit longer to scale up. You're going to have to involve quite a few more people to make sure you have the right visibility in the organization that this is really a priority, and that we need the support of IT and different functional leaders. We need experts to help us chart this course. And sometimes that can be a little bit more challenging, but we see that a proof of concept can usually stand up 3 to 5 significantly valuable AI or automation use cases within the first year. And then the final one is related to enterprise-wide. So this one takes a little bit more time to set up because you've got to have leadership alignment. This has to be a priority for the organization. You have to have the right stakeholders involved. And there's a tremendous opportunity when you get all the right people at the table, you've set up the right frameworks to really accelerate innovation within the organization, make a really significant impact on your operations. And then also it highlights that network effect, the constant learnings of the technology that can be derived across the industry and funneled into your organization to make sure that it's delivering significant value and keeping up with the rate of innovation and advancement that this technology has really started to take on. Some of the cons of this is that the enterprise-wide commitment, it can be challenging to pull together the right people, to make this a priority, to educate the leaders in your organization. One of the other challenges with this is that some folks when it's not maintained in-house, that can feel like they're giving something up. And that can be something challenging to overcome. But when you look at it versus, do we want to become a software company? Do we want to become an AI company? Some of the challenges that would be sort of mitigated by controlling this and having the maintenance and hosting and everything in-house, the resources that requires can oftentimes be a compelling reason not to want to take on that additional burden. And also, one of the challenges here is that the scope is oftentimes less defined. It's really aligning with a vendor partner for a flexible environment where you can identify opportunities, pick things up that not necessarily says, these are the 20 things we're doing this year, because after, the 5th thing, priorities might change. So sometimes that can be a little bit challenging for organizations to get to. So making sure you're aligned with your vendor partner is really critical, but the output of this type of approach with the type of buy-in and support these programs have really accelerates the value, and we're looking at roughly 10 to 12 use cases or workflows that can be deployed within a first year of a program like that. So the first one we're going to talk about today is the point solution. And again, we'll walk you through a couple customer examples, and the customer examples will actually have timestamps of when we partnered with them, because there's things that we've learned and started to implement as best practice, standard operating procedures that we introduce now that maybe we didn't early on, because this technology is evolving. The things that we're learning as we're partnering with organizations is constantly evolving. And one of the interesting things about the technology is just there's still so much untapped potential that if you're not flexible in your learnings, it's going to be more challenging to capitalize on those that have gone before you. But before I jump into the point solution, I am going to open it up to a poll question. So if you will all please answer the poll question. The question is, in which area would you start, or maybe you have started, your organization's AI and automation journey? We've listed prior authorization. This is a headache for a lot of folks, so usually we see this come up. Eligibility, your claims processes, supply chain, pharmacy, or other. I'll give you all a few minutes, not a few minutes, I'll give you a few seconds to punch in your answers, and then we'll take a look at the results here in a second. All right, the results are in. It looks like the lion's share is, well, there's 25% in other, 25% in claims, 20% in prior authorization. Great, this is great information. I appreciate you all sharing your input. So this really dovetails nicely into some of the use cases and point solutions that our partners have adopted. So I'll orient you a little bit to the information on the slide, as it will be consistent for each of the customer profiles or journeys that we're going to highlight. You can see up in the top right, we have the time at which the partnership between Olive and this organization had started. So this can, you can reference this to see things that we've learned that are now becoming standard operating procedures with folks that started later in the process, because the technology and the vendors in this space are really evolving just as quickly as the technology. Then you can see the sort of geographic region, the core system that they're using, and also for a size indicator for you to sort of match your organization up with these organizations, we've included their net patient revenue. So in the example one for the point solution, we started with claim status checks, which looked like 25% of the audience was interested in exploring claim status. I think that when I say claim status checks, I think this is different than the transactional environment that we're just returning claim status. It's more intelligent claim status. So making sure we're using the intelligence of the information we're capturing to suppress accounts or prioritize accounts with a higher net dollar return. There's a lot of different things that you can do here. In this organization, this was actually involved the senior director of the revenue cycle. So not a lot of people were involved in this process. It was a leader that was looking for a solution to their problem on reducing the manual touches and claims. Their goals were to expand the capacity of their team, reducing the cost to collect, and improve the quality of their services. And what we automated for them was claim status checks, so helping them prioritize the work that truly needs the human interaction, and using the intelligence of the data that we're interacting with to make sure that we're maximizing the effective navigation of the claims process. And the agreement structure that we had with them was workflow-based, so a very defined scope of work. And the results of this were, we obviously checked a lot of claims. The team's productivity tripled, and there's a significant reduction in their cost to collect. And now what's next with this organization is that they are working on getting enterprise buy-in. It was challenging because we had a single leader leading this initiative initially. It didn't have much buy-in. So over the last year or two, we've really been focused on educating the rest of the organization and getting the right key stakeholders at the table to capitalize on the value that can be generated across the organization. And throughout that period, we've identified over $8 million in opportunity to automate functions across several different functions. In example 2, you can see that this organization partnered with us a little bit later, about a year after that first organization had. And one of the key differences here is that there were a significant number of other individuals that we started to involve. They focused on prior authorization, and it initially started with, again, a senior director within their revenue cycle operations who quickly identified that their CIO needed to be involved in the conversation. And the goal here was to increase the capacity of their workforce. And again, this agreement structure was more workflow specific, so a very defined statement of work that made it challenging when we didn't have the right folks bought in to expand to different areas. But the results were that we got a few automations live. We had a 49% reduction in human touches. And what's next is that over the last year, we've been able to get the right stakeholders involved. And now there is 7 different functional areas outside of revenue cycle that are engaged, 20 automations on their roadmap, and over $17 million worth of savings that are on the roadmap of projects to be delivered within the next calendar year. And now they've expanded their contract to a more flexible enterprise-wide capability. The third example for point solution was poignant with COVID-19 this year. We had a partner approach us and say, we have a really significant problem with the throughput that we can have with our testing capability. So can we deploy this technology to, again, reduce the wait times, increase the capacity to register patients? So we worked with them on a very, very unique process of helping to streamline the registration for the testing process of COVID-19. And this agreement structure that they adopted was a value-based contract. So it was clearly aligned to value, which gave us a lot of flexibility with a unique and custom solution to make sure that we were focusing on the things that we needed to do. And also one thing that you'll notice here is the stakeholders that were involved. The entire C-suite was aware of this technology and the adoption of this, which really helped us drive efficiencies and achieve the results that are highlighted here on the slide, because they made this as a priority for the organization. We had the right stakeholders involved, and all the leaders in the organization were aligned around making sure that this project was successful, which made it delivered in 40 business days, which is monumental achievement for something as unique as a process that had never been automated using AR automation before. So some of the key takeaways on the point solution piece is get the right people involved, be flexible, set up an agreement, a structure, or a governance structure that allows you to make sure that you're focusing on what you need to be focusing on and having the right stakeholders there to accelerate when you do have an idea, having IT involved, having the right priority placed on it by your leadership to make sure they're communicating to folks that we need to execute on this because it is a strategic priority for us. And also, as you saw in those examples, the varying timeframes in which they had adopted the technology. As an organization at Olive, we were recommending the greater involvement of the right stakeholders because we know that that really accelerates the value that these technologies can have within the organization, and also the technology is advancing to allow for unique processes to be delivered in 40 business days. The second one we're going to talk about is proof of concept. But before we jump into that, I wanted to ask another question. Is there an AI or automation program at your organization today? There's a couple different answers. Yes, we are doing this, and we have a successful enterprise-wide initiative. The second one, yes, it's a successful initiative within my department. Yes, but it is not yielding the results that we expected. And then no, but we plan to have an AI or automation program within the next 6 months. No, but within a year, we'd like to have this. And no, we do not have any plans for one in the future or other. I'll give you couple seconds to answer here. All right, so the responses are in. We have 11% that have a successful enterprise-wide initiative, 11 with a successful initiative within their department. It looks like the lion's share of folks on the line do not have any plans to implement one in the future. I will say AI is here to stay. I might reconsider some of those plans, but nonetheless, we're going to dive a little bit into this proof of concept. And to help orient you all, this is where they've selected multiple processes within a department or across departments to deploy the technology. So you can see that this is a little bit more of a mature model, and you'll see consistently in most of these that there are a number of different leaders that are involved in the process. So with this example, it's a Mid-Atlantic organization on Cerner, about $4.3 billion in revenue, and partnered with Olive late 2018. And they had their executive team. So they had a committee that they had pulled together to evaluate different technologies in this space. They actually selected multiple vendors to do proofs of concept in different areas of the organization and then compared those against each other. The goal of this was really to validate the technology, and the work that we took on for them was 10 processes within their revenue cycle operations to be compared against processes through other implementation models throughout the organization. And the agreement structure was workflow by workflow, so statement of work for each of the workflows, and a little less flexibility than we would recommend going forward based on our learnings. But the results were significant. This group actually pulled together a committee to help with some of the change management strategies, having internal job fairs to really accelerate the value that they could achieve with this technology by redeploying staff in other areas to considerably add on to the value that just the automation was delivering, to increase the return on investment of their human staff whose functions were largely automated due to the work that we had implemented, but redeploying them elsewhere as resources in healthcare, I think we all know, are at a bit of a premium. But since we did that initial proof of concept, we've actually expanded with this partner to look at a lot of different processes. We've updated our agreement structure to, again, be our recommended, flexible, value-focused approach. And we found about 150 different workflows across the enterprise that we're now prioritizing. 16 of those were approved in the first phase after the expansion, and there's estimated $2.1 million in projected cost savings that this program is generating on an annual basis, and we anticipate that number to rise. The second example on the proof of concept side is an organization in the Midwest on Epic. They're about $1.9 billion in net patient revenue. And you can see that this organization partnered with us in late 2019. So some of the frameworks that we were able to adopt to make standard operating procedures, again, having the right folks involved, multiple stakeholders and executive team members to make this a priority in the organization. Their goals were to increase capacity and also educate their organization. So we started in revenue cycle to show supply chain, pharmacy, and other areas what the impact could be. And those stakeholders were involved at the very beginning to watch the progress of the program to allow us to accelerate into other areas much more rapidly. And we adopted a performance-based agreement structure with them. So we aligned on hitting a value target. We charted a course for that, built a roadmap for that within revenue cycle. And what that's allowed for us to do is approve 28 workflows with about $7 million in perpetual year-over-year impact, margin improving impact across 7 departments. And what's next for them is, now that we had a strong proof of concept within their revenue cycle operations, supply chain, pharmacy, and other areas have started to incorporate some of their automation opportunities within the overall roadmap. So again, the key takeaways, set up a thorough review structure, get the right people involved, even if they're not necessarily going to be adding work to this roadmap initially, their visibility will be extremely important in accelerating this technology when there is proof. Think long-term, it's a program, not just a pilot. So make sure you have all those right folks at the table. And you want to prioritize, via our performance contract that we now make a standard operating procedure, we want to make sure we're aligning on significant financial impact within the organization to make sure it has the right commitment. And finally, the last one I'm going to touch on is enterprise-wide. So this is a sort of adoption methodology that we introduced. This was actually the first time we'd done this. It's called an alpha site. So we actually staff a team to work with this organization. We build out a command center on site with them, and we sort of lock arms with them to chart a course for AI and automation transformation within their organization. This was Alpha Site 001, but this adoption model is actually accelerating. We have 10 more that have contracted with us in this way because the technology is less unproven. There's a lot of use cases to point to, but it's all about having the right folks involved, setting up an agreement structure that allows you to be flexible in chasing down value within your organization. And some of the results you can see here that there's a significant amount of opportunity, $10.5 million in opportunity from automations identified within the first year. They're returning a 5-to-1 return on investment across all of their departments. And the goals are to continue to expand this partnership. And due to the forethought on setting up a flexible agreement structure, we've been able to expand in incorporating new technologies, new departments, without having to go back to the drawing board. And this flexible nature really has allowed us to accelerate this program through their organization. So key takeaways on this model of adopting sort of an AI as a service or introducing it to your organization on an enterprise-wide capacity, it's really important to get the exec team familiar with the technology. It's also important to be flexible in the execution, to learn along the way. There is a lot of things that this technology can accomplish for your organization, and those that have a voracious hunger to learn about the technology are much more effective at implementing it in a significant way to drive value for their organization. And also, this organization partnered with us late last year. The technology and the vendor, ourselves included, have advanced quite a bit since some of the earlier implementations, and it's really becoming an accelerant to driving value within the organization. But I wanted to take a moment now. I know I've been doing a lot of talking, and I hope that you're able to pull some lessons learned out of the different adoption models that folks have adopted here. But I'm going to play a video of some of the executive leaders that we work with sharing and re-emphasizing some of the key takeaways that I've pulled out through these customer journeys and these customer profiles, and let them share with you a little bit of their own direct feedback on some of the takeaways to re-emphasize the value.
Our first day live, we had 300 people adopt the methodology without incident, and that was amazing. Now the adoption rate is over 70%. It has literally taken the process for care from 12 minutes to about 2 minutes, which is amazing. We're able to, at this point, we are seeing our average in an hour was about 50. We're doubling that right now, which means our waiting times are minimal. Just an incredible process. And we're layering the next pieces, which is automated eligibility checking, taking care of any duplicates if they were to be identified, and the automated coding of these lab tests. Those are things that are in build right now. And I can tell you, the way it happened, it was a unified front. The communication with our senior leaders, from the CEO, the whole C-suite, was behind us, and we gave them information, and they supported the effort all the way. Our IT department was amazing, but the clinical folks were the best because they really wanted to make it work, wanted to work with us. So we bridged that gap between clinical and financials, and now have a product that is really great for our patients, but also for our staff. And that gave us the ability to take our employees that are not going to employee health because they're symptomatic. They're going into employee health because they're planning on traveling, they're planning maybe to get a dental procedure, something personal. And now they have their own track using the technology to get their testing. And that has made them extremely happy that they don't have to go into our standard COVID testing lines, that they have their own avenue and they're getting their information very quickly. So that has been a major satisfier for our staffs.
We wanted to just explore it and see, is this real? So we embarked on really what was a pilot program initially, where we tried some different automations, just see if it worked and if we could see benefits from that. And what we found from that was it absolutely works. And not only that, was very invigorating and exciting for the team. So today we have 18 automations live, and we have 19 more in process, and we have 4 departments that are actively engaged and automations are live, and we have another 9 departments that are involved in the build. And so, and then we have some others who are exploring and thinking about how they might be able to use automations going forward. So we're really starting to try to scale it more broadly across finance and more broadly outside of finance across the organization. So it's been very exciting, and our leaderships are finding it very engaging and energizing, and it's really going to be an important part of our strategy going forward.
So we have 9 live automations. All of those are within our revenue services team today. However, we have 40 automations in build or in design phase, and then an additional 80 that are kind of in our opportunities identified queue. So we have really taken a broad approach to using automation across our entire system. What really triggered us to look at automation and why we have so many in queue across so many different departments is that scarcity of resource. You know, we're all really struggling to find healthcare resources, especially resources at the bedside. And so for us, we wanted to take out any and all of those robotic type processes that we had humans doing, let the machines do that, and let our humans be humans. Retrain people, repurpose people, put them at the bedside, put them doing the work that we all came into this business to do, which is care for our patients.
We think there's just unlimited potential. What I've shared with our leadership team and our folks is that I see this as so different than a typical IT implementation in that you're never done. So we'll never be done. It's just looking for that next opportunity where we can roll it out and take advantage of it. And I have clinicians knocking on my door. Folks are just lining up, wanting to get on board. And I think really that today the rate limiting step is ourselves. We would love to figure out a way to go faster. And so we're constantly.
So I think one of the things that we've really identified in the different ways that folks are introducing this technology to their organization, whether it's point solution, proof of concept, or enterprise-wide, is really related to organizational readiness. So whether it's a department that is skeptical but they're curious, or if it's an organization or department that may have more familiarity with the technology, it really is the definition on how and why people are introducing the technology in these different ways. I don't think any of these is more right or more wrong than the other, but this is sort of what we've found as some of the key considerations on how and why folks are deploying in a point solution, proof of concept, or enterprise-wide. So I think with that, that's sort of where we wrap up. I hope this was helpful for you all, and I'll turn it back over to Molly for any questions that we might have gotten.
Yes, thank you, Matt, for that great presentation today. So attendees, we will now begin the question and answer session of the webinar. You can submit any questions you have by typing them into the Q&A box on your webinar console. So Matt, let's get started with our first question that has come in, and that is, where has Olive seen the most clinical benefit of AI being involved with COVID response?
That's a great question. I think the one example we gave on streamlining the COVID testing process at an organization in the Northeast really was helping them to scale the ability to increase testing within their organization. A lot of this work ended up falling on their clinical or nursing staff to help mitigate some of the challenges with just the capacity constraints that they had and the volume that they were serving. So a lot of that actually returned a lot of time to clinicians to focus more on that. We're constantly developing, we have a COVID-19 task force within our organization to look at more opportunities to increase the capacity of the clinicians, nursing, and also administrative staff functions as it relates to some of the pressing challenges that we're seeing arise related to COVID-19, and especially with some of the rising numbers, we're based in Ohio as well, that we're seeing and thinking more strategically about how we can increase their capacity with the needs that are ever developing as it relates to the pandemic that we're all working through right now.
Okay, thanks, Matt. This next question is, what's Alice's position on working with, oh, you know what, let me go to this one next. How much IT support involvement is required?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the AI as a service implementation model, it can be a fairly light lift from an IT perspective. It's always important to make sure you have the IT stakeholders involved and engaged in the process. A lot of times, since we're doing this and we're sort of sharing best practices across our implementations across the industry, we actually come to the table with a pretty clear delineation of responsibility and time commitments for different stakeholders within the IT organization. A lot of times it can be as simple as making sure that we're provisioning credentials for your AI worker to be able to access the systems. So engaging with your third-party vendors is also very important in this step. But as far as building, implementing, and supporting, AI as a service, that comes complementary with the AI as a service model. So it's really just helping set up the environments for the technology to do what it needs to do. And then it's on us as the AI as a service provider to build, deploy, monitor, maintain, derive value from the data of those processes. So that is the lion's share of the work, and that does not fall on the IT staff within the organization. As we all know, IT resources usually are at a premium. So we do our best, and I think the AI as a service model definitely lends itself nicely to maximizing your IT resources and putting less burden on that staff with a minimally invasive way to implement a more advanced technology that can be resource intensive. And our ability to sort of scale our learnings, I think it allows us to do things a little bit more effectively because, you know, you're not just building authorization automation once, we're doing authorization automations across 60 healthcare systems. So there's efficiencies that we gain as an organization focused on these areas that would be challenging to gain those efficiencies internally if it was more of an IT intensive process or supported by the IT infrastructure. Great question.
Perfect, thanks, Matt. So speaking of different staff and departments, how much they're involved in this work, this next attendee would like to know, what is the role of the compliance department in the implementation of AI?
That's a great question. Compliance is usually involved. Specifically, we haven't necessarily ourselves deployed anything that directly automates a compliance function. However, the ability for a technology to log into your systems, interact with different vendors and different attributes within the workflow, there's definitely a compliance component that must be involved in the governance process that's evaluating the automations that are being brought up, their impact that they're going to have to make sure that we maintain compliance as defined by the organization and the compliance office. So usually it's involvement in the governance structure, just as awareness to make sure that we're staying within compliance on the different automation opportunities that we're deploying within the organization. But there are significant opportunities to apply AI and automation to compliance-specific functions as well. So I don't want to root that out. I think at this point, there's usually more value-driving automations in other areas where compliance is more peripherally involved today. But they're definitely a stakeholder that is at the table for something like this as you're introducing it to your organization.
Wonderful. Thanks, attendees, for these questions that are rolling in. Matt, this next one is from an attendee who would like to know, has Olive been used for any supply chain solutions?
Yes, we have a significant practice within our supply chain. I would say revenue cycle, again, 90% of our organizations have started in that area because of the tremendous amount of opportunity to reduce costs and drive revenue improvement. but the second and third highest impact areas that we are deploying solutions in today is supply chain and then pharmacy. Pharmacy has gotten a lot of interest as of recent. We have a shared services group within our organization that is building and deploying and designing solutions designed specifically for each functional area. And supply chain is one that has gotten a lot of attention, and we have a lot of automations that are deployed within supply chain operations today. And we'd be happy, you can either go to our website or follow up with us directly, and we can share with you sort of a menu of automation opportunities that can drive value within supply chain operations as well. Great question.
Terrific. Another attendee would like to know, do you see a way, Matt, to use AI to help ease the burden of physicians interacting with EMRs?
Absolutely. I think there's a tremendous opportunity. We actually made an announcement earlier this year on a new platform that we've deployed called Olive Helps, which is actually surfacing information to folks at the right time, the right place when they need it. And one of those is a tremendous opportunity to augment the human workforce. So right now, a lot of the automations we talked about today, we're taking on work that humans no longer will have to do. There's also a tremendous opportunity, which I think is sort of the taking work away that they don't need to do anymore is sort of the tip of the iceberg, but the lion's share of opportunity is getting people the information that they need. A lot of times the work and the knowledge are very far from each other, which can make it really challenging for clinicians to navigate through the myriad of different technologies to get the information they need to make effective decisions. And we have done a lot of exploration in this space, a lot of partners developing and deploying solutions to really maximize the effectiveness of that group as well.
Matt, so I'm going to go back to the supply chain topic for one moment. An attendee would like to know, are you seeing many AI use cases for hospital providers paying their suppliers? More specifically, AI use cases for providers' accounts payable departments.
Yeah, we have quite a few automations deployed in accounts payable. Not to take over the rest of the time that we have a series of workflow diagrams, estimated benefit and impact within supply chain and accounts payable that we can definitely follow up with and share with the individual that would like some more information on this. There's a ton of opportunity in those areas that we would be happy to walk you through and show you exactly how you can introduce AI or automation into those key functions to maximize the value that you can drive.
Okay, terrific. So a couple of attendees would like to know, just to get a better sense of how much work and time is required to get some of these initiatives off the ground. So one question, Matt, is how long does it take to get something like this going? And then another attendee would like to know, is there a large build to map data specific to lab data to gain insight into department process decisions?
Great question. So the first one on how much time, energy, and effort, I think the real important thing is, before you engage with the vendor is pulling together the right people. I would say educating your organization, getting the right leaders involved is probably where the most of the time should be spent, because it needs that sort of organizational priority and alignment with leaders across the organization. But then when we're looking at implementing and deploying a solution, it can be very quick if you have the right people. You have IT at the table, you have the right executive support. I had mentioned in one of the examples earlier, the COVID-19 testing process we did in an organization in the Northeast. That was deployed in just 40 days. But that would not have been possible if we didn't work with the right stakeholders across the organization. If the C-suite hadn't aligned that this is a priority and we need to make this a priority because of the critical nature of this task. And I think that really allowed us to accelerate the value. You can see the delivery time in deploying solutions diminish significantly if it's a smaller initiative. It's not a priority. We don't have the right people involved because there's a lot of education and sort of doubling back on opportunities to update people on what we're doing, and that it is a priority and that it's driving value that really gets in the way of accelerating the introduction of the innovation. And the second question around mapping data as it relates to lab-specific use cases, I myself am not as familiar with that, but there's definitely some very smart people at Olive that I could put you in touch with to help connect the dots as it relates to our ability to use that data effectively in an AI component.
Terrific. Well, attendees, thank you for your questions. And Matt, thank you for answering those questions that came in, and as well as an excellent presentation today. Also want to thank Olive for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content that was presented today, please check out the resources section on your webinar console and fill out the post-webinar survey. Thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Becker's, we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.